Title: The Rain That Changed Everything. The rain beat relentlessly against the windows of Ellery's diner, drumming a steady rhythm that echoed the heaviness in Sophie Lane's chest. She had worked at the small, time-worn spot on Ashbury Avenue for nearly 6 years. The scent of grilled onions and brewing coffee clung to her uniform, and the permanent ache in her feet was as familiar as her own heartbeat. But tonight, something felt different. The usually bustling dinner crowd had trickled down to a single trucker nursing his coffee in the corner and a college kid scrolling on his tablet. Sophie wiped down the counter, pausing as a flicker of movement caught her eye. Outside, a boy no older than 7 sat in a wheelchair, parked just beneath the diner's flickering neon sign. A faded quilt was wrapped around his slight frame, soaked by the downpour. His hair stuck to his forehead, and his gaze was fixed on the street. Sophie's heart twisted. She dropped the rag, grabbed a towel, and dashed into the rain. "Hey there, sweetheart," she said, crouching beside him, her voice gentle as the storm howled. "What are you doing out here all alone?" The boy looked up with wide hazel eyes. "Waiting for my dad," he mumbled. Sophie scanned the empty street. No one in sight. "It's freezing out here," she said. "Come inside. Let's get you warm." The boy hesitated, then nodded. Sophie wheeled him inside, settled him near the radiator, and draped the towel over his shoulders. "I'm Sophie," she said, smiling. "What's your name?" "Elliot," he replied. "Elliot Mason." "Nice to meet you, Elliot. Grilled cheese sound good." She didn't wait for an answer. Minutes later, she returned with a steaming sandwich and tomato soup. "This one's on me." Elliot's face lit up as he bit into the sandwich. "This is amazing," he said, grinning. They chatted about superheroes and favorite animals. Sophie found herself laughing, the tension in her shoulders easing. She didn't ask questions, didn't push. She just made him feel safe. What Sophie didn't know was that across the street, a black SUV sat idling in the shadows. Inside was Gabriel Mason, the CEO of Mason Global Logistics. At 43, he was known for his ruthlessness in boardrooms and silence in tabloids. But right now, he wasn't a billionaire or a titan of industry. He was a father, watching a stranger feed his disabled son with more care than many in his inner circle had ever shown. He'd been delayed in a meeting and returned to find Elliot missing from the valet. Panic had gripped him, but now he sat transfixed by what he saw through the glass. Sophie's kindness, her warmth, her instinct to protect, not perform. And it shook him. Back in the SUV, Gabriel's assistant Ava broke the silence. "Should I go get him?" "No," Gabriel said. "I still locked on the diner." "Not yet." That night, he couldn't stop thinking about Sophie Lane. Back at his penthouse overlooking Lake Michigan, Gabriel pulled up the security feed and watched the footage again. The way she knelt, the way she didn't ask for anything. He called Ava. Find out who she is. By dawn, Ava had the file. Sophie Lane, 29. High school graduate. Waitress at Ellery's. Former foster kid. No family. Monthly income barely covered rent. Known by locals for her generosity. Gabriel studied the pages, moved more than he'd ever admit. She reminded him of someone he once knew, someone who'd believed in the goodness of people, even when life didn't. The next afternoon, Sophie received an odd call from Ellery's owner. A man named Gabriel Mason had requested to meet her. At first, she thought it was a prank. Then a driver appeared at the diner in a town car. She arrived at Mason Global's glass tower, feeling wildly out of place. Her boots squeaked against marble floors. The receptionist eyed her with a mixture of confusion and curiosity. Gabriel welcomed her with a firm handshake. He didn't smile. "You're probably wondering why you're here," he said. Sophie nodded. Yeah, I saw what you did for my son. You didn't know who he was. You didn't know who I was. And you didn't care. You just helped him." Sophie blinked. "I couldn't leave a child out in the rain." "Most would have walked past," Gabriel replied. "You didn't. That matters to me. I'd like to offer you a position." She froze. "A position? I don't know anything about business. I'm just—" "Exactly. You're not here because you know stocks or mergers. You're here because you have character. And that's rarer than skill." Gabriel offered her a role in his personal outreach division, focused on employee welfare and community engagement. It came with benefits, a 6-figure salary, and training. Sophie didn't know what to say. "Why me?" she whispered. Gabriel looked her in the eye. "Because you didn't see a billionaire's son. You saw a boy." She accepted. The transition wasn't easy. In the polished world of Mason Global, Sophie felt like an outsider. But Gabriel backed her publicly. Introduced her in meetings. Had her shadow senior leaders. Slowly, she earned their respect, not because of her title, but because she listened. She understood people in a way data never could. But not everyone was pleased. Rumors began. A leak of sensitive information was traced back to Sophie's department. The timing pointed to her. An anonymous tip linked her to a competitor. Gabriel summoned her to his office. "I gave you everything," he said, voice low. "Tell me it wasn't you." Sophie's face went pale. "It wasn't. I swear." "Then help me prove it." They launched an internal investigation. Sophie worked late nights, retracing every step, every file, every conversation. It turned out an executive named Miles Brennan had used Sophie's access as a cover. He saw her as the perfect scapegoat. But Gabriel found the evidence, and he confronted Miles himself. Brennan was fired. Charges followed. Sophie was cleared. Afterward, Gabriel stood in front of her again. "You didn't just prove your innocence. You proved your worth. I was right to trust you." Sophie blinked back tears. "You changed my life. You saved my son," he replied. Years passed. Sophie grew into her role, launching employee support initiatives that transformed the company's culture. Under her guidance, the company created programs for single parents, veterans, and youth from underserved communities. Elliot thrived too. With new therapies and stability, he found his voice, both literally and emotionally. He often visited Sophie at work, calling her his hero. And then, one rainy afternoon, something remarkable happened. Gabriel stood on stage at Mason Global's annual conference, flanked by Elliot in a blazer too big for him and Sophie in a tailored navy suit. "This company was built on logistics," Gabriel said, "but its future is built on heart. And no one represents that better than Sophie Lane." He stepped aside. Sophie took the mic. "Years ago, I was just a waitress. One rainy night changed everything. Not because of who I met, but because someone believed in what I stood for. You don't need to be a billionaire to change a life. Sometimes, you just need to share a sandwich." The room erupted in applause. Later that evening, as the rain pattered against the windows of the company gala, Elliot danced with Sophie to a slow piano tune. "You're my favorite person," he whispered. Sophie smiled through tears. "You changed my life first, kiddo." And in the shadows, Gabriel Mason watched, his heart full. Not because he was rich, but because he had witnessed something priceless. Human kindness. And he would never forget it. End.